agreement, and the agreement lays out a couple of distinct pieces of property, and so I kind of gave him that assurance that this is what the agreement says. He had, I mean, those are the types of concerns, there were just a couple of them.
He was okay with the agreement, though,
He was okay with the agreement.
to the extent that it was
To the
outlined.
extent, I mean, obviously, with the posture of it, you know, the council signing, the mayor signing first, right? So he can reject that if there's a major issue hanging out there. But having spoken with him for nearly half an hour today, I don't anticipate a legal issue hanging out there. I think it's more him understanding that if it's not in the agreement, then by implication, there's not going to be harm to the property that's not laid out there. He had that concern because there's been a lot of discussions that led up to this agreement that may have gone by the wayside that aren't captured here. But no one's ever told them, hey, we're not going this way, or we're not putting a well here. They just drafted an agreement that lays out what they are affirmatively doing. So he had just some general concerns because no one's really spoken to him. So.
Are we under the essence of time here? Do we have to get this pushed through tonight? I would feel more comfortable to maybe describe to the home or the landowner what's going on. He's been kept out in the dark for quite some time, I do believe.
So this is what I explained to him. I mean, I don't think we are based on the timelines of the project, but I don't think there is harm in having it approved. And if he doesn't have a major, if he has, let's say, let's back up, if he has a major issue with it, then he doesn't sign it. And we come back and we do it again, hopefully with some sort of compromise on what the terms are. If he comes to me and says, these are the things, but hey, you know what, BJ called me, and it's all good, just nobody talked to me, and I'm fine with it, then now we have a signed agreement from the city, and we can move forward without delay. So that would be my advice, is to do that, unless the city is inclined to add a term in there. I just don't have anything to add that he's provided me that's really legal at this point. That's a legal question. It's more about notice, it sounds like, and being able to participate in this. And unfortunately, they had a prior engagement, they weren't able to be here tonight, so.
Well,
The landowner?
Yes.
Okay.
I,
So does it sound like BJ needs to get with the landowner and walk him through this, or is that going to be
I
more
think that would be
you, or-
very helpful for them feeling better about the whole situation. I think, you know, he's requested that BJ just walk parts of the property with him for a couple minutes. And not to throw BJ under the bus or anything like that, but I think just sort of understanding it, I mean, they're not represented by council. He's given a very short agreement that has a long legal description in it. The map that he's been operating off of, because it has to be a legal description, is not part of this for legal reasons, because the legal description is what's going to be binding. And so he just kind of feels in the dark and a little bit uncomfortable, but I don't think that's going to thwart.
I don't blame him either. It's a slap in the face.
Yeah.
I think BJ needs to get down there as soon as possible.
I mean, it's my impression that my meeting with him today went a long way in making him feel better. Just because he had someone to voice his concerns to.
Perhaps we should table the item until the next meeting, or all of this should be straightened out. We should not,
I think that would be the friendly thing to do, the neighborly thing to do. I really do.
I think that the property owner should actually know where the lines are going to go, what's going to be. Otherwise, I don't feel like the city should get involved in the lawsuit later on down the road.
I'm for tabling this until BJ has a chance to walk him through the property.
I believe we already have a motion in the second on the table. on this.
Well, I will modify the motion to table it then.
I'll second.
I'll withdraw my second.
that being the case, I just want to be clear here that this is NDOT's project, and they should be doing a lot of the coordination here with this landowner, should they not? As far as the design and
city
everything like
usually have
that.
the burden of.
Do they have to?
The landowners and easements. I think
Yeah.
so.
So, my understanding is that NDOT was very upfront about, I mean, they have a whole manual on this about the land owners and what they do, and whole departments that deal with this. But my understanding is that they're going to be very hands-off with regard to the city taking care of this issue because it involves our residents, right? And they don't want to come in and make it look like they're sort of muscling anybody.
Well, I think we're involved because when they're done with it, it's our infrastructure, this part is.
Yes.
And that's the issue there. But as far as the design work goes and where it goes, that's all NDOT. And if that's going through BJ, that's fine. But as long as he's got the information, and we're not waiting for information from NDOT, I guess is.
I don't have that impression, but I mean, that's with the caveat that the landowner may have concerns, so there is potentially information hanging out there. I mean, by
It
example.
may be information that BJ doesn't have, I guess is what my.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yeah, so by example, he was concerned that there was talk about placing a well on his property. Right, well, that's not captured in this agreement whatsoever.
Right.
So I'm wondering if was sort of a preliminary discussion that went by the wayside. So those are the types of issues that I think could be resolved, but, tabling is prudent as well. He informed me that, he really only needs a week to come up with his list of items that concern him, and I do believe that just the interface that we had today sort of assuaged some of those concerns.
And his list might get a lot smaller if he has some clarification too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there any further discussion on this item? We have a motion to table, all in favor? Any opposed? Item 2, Chairman O'Flaherty, discussion for possible action, approval of an extension of the existing consulting services agreement between the City of Ely and Basin Engineering. I will entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the extension of the existing consulting services agreement between the City of Ely and Basin Engineering.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And I would just interject, if you don't mind, just for a second before the vote. I would like to see it to be for a sort of fixed duration. I was envisioning maybe just one meeting. The reason it's agendized like this is because I didn't have a proposal from Basin Engineering, and the terms in the original, the agreement couldn't just be renewed, was the language that was coming out of the other council commission.
There was no renewal clause.
There was no renewal clause, and so to take action on its renewal would make no sense, because it was starting at a monthly rate that's 4 years old at this point. So we needed to rework the agreement, and I really only need one meeting's time to do that, so.
Would you be willing to?
You want to table this one too then?
No, it needs to be extended because
Yeah,
his agreement is up on the August.
Well, we could modify it then
Would you
to,
add
for
a
a
date?
year, yes, to go to September 1st, 2020.
September 12th is what we'll need.
Oh,
September
September
12th of 2019.
2019.
Yeah, we just needed extended to the
Yeah.
next.
Okay, all right. Send it, yeah, go for it. September 12th, 2019, we move to extend the services between city and Ely and Basin Engineering until that date.
Would you be willing to take that again, Brian?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
I have a question. Who's going to be working on this contract? Will that come from Basin or is the city going to reward it?
It's gonna be me.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, they had a formal contract drafted years ago. I think that that's been kind of edited by the city and other parties that they've dealt with along the way. So I'm gonna spearhead the changes because they're not ways over there, and they can approve them or not approve them as they see fit, so.
Jim, did you have something to add?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I talked with Brian about, I don't really have a problem with an extension because I think it's a prudent thing to do, but it's the wording on the agenda. The August 8th agenda had no word extension, it was renew. So in my feeling, and the attorney, he's twisted my arm and I've twisted his, but I'm still taking a stance that the wording on this dating back to August 8th is incorrect. It was an approval of a renew the contract rather than extension. To me, we're misinforming the public.
But like they just said, there's no renewal clause in that contract, so it almost has to be reworded on the agenda.
Yes.
I mean, the action taken doesn't make legal sense to me.
So I
Either board, I mean, it just, and if we're gonna delve into this, simply put, my opinion is that this item is properly agendized for purposes of the city council meeting, right? It's well within the authority of the city council to take this action.
But after it was tabled the first time, the way it was worded?
Well, I think he's talking about what came out of the other board's recommendation, which is only a recommendation.
And then with the council, they did not act on that. I think the council was expecting this meeting to have a decision to go out for an RFQ or accept the engineering company we have right now.
The council extended the contract until August 2nd to make a decision and have a new contract proposed to the council. Now we receive it at this time.
You know, if we only need one meeting, I mean, again, if the council says it's okay, we can take a vote. I got my feelings and so be it.
The motion at the time is just to extend it to the next meeting, so then it can be properly worded, is, I think you've got a good point there.
Jim's comments have been
It
noted.
would be retroactive to September 1st. I'm sure it'd be the same thing.
Is there any further discussion on this item? With that, I will entertain a motion. We've already entertained the motion. I will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's been a long week.
Nay.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Item 7, discussion for possible action of the Ely City Council as recommended by the City Planning Commission. Chairman Fielder, discussion for possible action, approval of home occupation permit to James S. Beecher, the executive law firm business, DBA James S. Beecher, located at 623 Murray Street, Ely, Nevada. I will entertain a motion on this item.
So moved, that was done.
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I think if you abstain from voting, you have to give a reason.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, well, my wife is an attorney and does work with Mr. Beecher, and so I don't want to have my vote be judged to go any way. So,
Item 2, Chairman Peeler, discussion for possible action, approval of home occupation permit to Mackenzie Peterson to conduct an attorney business, DBA Mackenzie Peterson Esquire, located at 1290 Avenue L in Ely, Nevada.
So moved as read. Make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion on this item?
I will abstain.
Abstain again for the same, yeah.
Abstain.
And just to be clear, I think what you're saying is because you feel like the vote here could affect your life in a positive or negative way.
Any other discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried and so ordered. 8, items for discussion, possible action only of the Ely City Council, the consent agenda.
The April 19th minutes are done, that's all out of that list. But I just want to bring to everyone's attention, if you haven't had a chance to read those minutes, those are important because that was the last budget workshop, and there was a lot of detail in there about what's in the budget. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Okay, with that, I will accept a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to accept the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried and so ordered. B, new business. Mayor Roberts?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
That was just for the minutes, we're gonna discuss.
Oh, what do we need to do?
Oh, the
Bill said
consent
this.
agenda.
Okay, I have a question on the bills, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just need to know on page 5, the shadow gloves, loose gloves, what is that?
Wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, thank you. And then on page.
I'll send you for cleaning the bathroom. I
Oh,
see.
good. Yeah. Okay, I know that the city is now using the county's fuel station, and then also $2,200 bill to Hunt and Sons. Where is that fuel? So we're still,
No, I was under the impression most people were using the county,
if we need
except
to.
on the weekend.
Okay.
The fire department still uses our place quite a bit.
Yes.
Yeah, and I understand they're off hours,
Yes.
$480, $250, $187. Okay, just, I know the chief knows, well, we're running all kinds of hours. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And just to bring to everyone's attention, the last Hutton Sons bill that we received was 1,000 something, so it has gone down.
It's starting to go down.
Okay, all right, thank you.
B, new business, Mayor Robertson, discussion for possible action, confirmation of mayoral appointment of Councilman Sam Hanson as the city leader's representative on the White Plains County Local Emergency Planning Committee.
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second? Is there any discussion on this? All in favor? Any opposed? You're on, Shane.
Oh, thank you.
2, council members, Animal Control Advisory Board Chairwoman Kaylin Roberts McMurray, discussion for possible action, approval of the City of Ely Animal Control Facility to participate in Maddie's Pet Adoption Days, September 27th to 28th, 2019. All adoption fees must be waived, and $200 will be given to the City of Ely Animal Control for every adoption of a dog cat to offset adoption event costs and other animal control needs. McMurray, how are you now?
Good.
Good.
I'm so excited to be up here. I was like. Anyways, does anyone have any questions regarding the adoption event?
If not, I will entertain a motion on this item.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on this or questions for Chairwoman?
I have one other question on this. How many animals do you think in within the animal control and adopted?
Adopted every month or through Maddie's Pet Project adoption?
Well, some of the details you can give us, because I think that's sort of work that program and you're really very well.
Thank you. So Maddie's Pet Project has held 3 adoption events here. One in April of last year, one in November of last year, and one in May of this year. And they've adopted out 10 animals, so that gives back the animal shelter $2,000. So it hasn't costed the animal shelter anything, and it's made money. So it's a huge asset to our community.
It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried so ordered.
Thank you.
Thanks. Item 3, Councilman Carson, White Plain County Tourism Director Kyle Horvath discussing only presentation regarding potential impacts of passage of proposed ordinance 726.
All right, thank you all for having me. You should have some papers in your packet that have the numbers that I'm about to go over. Sometimes it's easier for some visual. If anybody else in the audience would like to go over the numbers as I go, there's some presentations for everybody else. Again, my name is Kyle Horvath. I'm the Director of Tourism for White Pine County. I want to thank you for inviting me back to make this presentation. I just finished my first year on the job. And the last time I spoke in front of you, it was pretty much just how excited I was to be in the community and working with everybody and, just kind of more projections. So to be able to come back a year later and give it an opportunity to present on the impact of tourism and specifically the direct numbers that we've been able to produce over the last year, it is great to be able to help you guys in your decision on this next ordinance. So again, I appreciate it. I started with tourism in Nevada 20 years ago when I moved out here in '99. I started out providing recreational services in the Lake Tahoe Basin. Ultimately, that grew into starting my own business, working with visitors bureaus, working with parks and rec departments to manage facilities, to then provide those recreation services. And ultimately, over the last 6 years, I've worked with DMOs, and that's what started out as destination marketing organizations, now is more widely accepted as destination management organizations. And I'll touch on that, but essentially it's visitors bureaus. And I was the marketing manager for Carson City for the last 6 years. Saw that community through quite a bit of economic growth, and again, starting the second year here. So over those 20 years that I've been in Nevada tourism, it has changed dramatically. Not just what the state promotes of what its assets are and how it tries to attract people, but how it does it, and particularly the technologies that are available to do that. What was available 6 years ago is not the norm even to this day in how you market and how you try to draw people in. So it's been pretty whirlwind, but the one thing that has not changed in the accepted theory in tourism across the state is that tourism is the spearhead of real and long-term economic growth. And so what I mean by that is, and you can see on my introduction here, is by coming into a community, promoting the same quality of life assets to attract tourists of similar values, in hopes that eventually they move here, they open up businesses. That when you can show tourists coming into a community and there's foot traffic in the downtown, the locals are more encouraged to open up a business, fill that vacant building, go out and recruit, start something, because it's a lot less risky knowing that there's actually people coming into the community, leaving new money into the community and growing the economy. So, when we talk about real and long-term growth, especially for filling the city's coffers, it's about getting more people on the tax roll. It's about filling those empty homes, it's about filling those empty buildings, getting businesses opening up, and getting you guys some consistent long-term money. So, tourism is the #1 industry in Nevada. It supersedes everything else. Travel Nevada in 2017 did an economic assessment report where they hired a third party to come in. They do this every 2 or 3 years. And what that showed in 2017 is that tourism sustained about over 458,000 jobs. It's 27% of the job force is working in tourism. And even though we have a strong mine, that employs quite a bit of people, and prison that employs quite a bit of people, think about the hotels, the front desk workers, the restaurant workers, the servers, the housekeepers, everybody here that is employed that is impacted by tourism as well. So quite a big employer in the county as well. In 2017, tourism created $4.7 billion in state and local tax revenue. That was 26%. And in 2017, tourism contributed $23 billion to Nevada's total GDP. So that was 14.7%. But the big thing is that it brings new money into the community. We're not just redistributing wealth. We're actually growing the pie bigger for everybody. I always joked in the beginning, when I got into it, it was all about attracting people to your town, shaking the money out of their pockets and sending them home. Okay, well that's short-term economic growth. It's a very narrow-sighted view of how you're trying to grow a community. Really what you're trying to do is you're trying to invite them into your community, show them an amazing time, have them come back multiple times to contribute to your economy, and eventually they say, man, I just need to buy a place here. Or hey, wouldn't this be a great place for my employees to live? I'm going to move my business up here. And so when new money comes into the community, it's circulated on average about 3 times. I get a tip, I go buy something, that person gets paid, then it ends up in the bank. Okay, so again, we're talking about growing the economy as a whole. So when they created transient occupancy tax, it really was genius because it's an investment fund. It's a safety net for communities because we all know that industries ebb and flow, leadership ebbs and flows, but the way they set up tourism is it's an independent agency that collects a state-ordered tax and works with the local communities to reinvest that to perpetuate the power of tourism, the economic engine of tourism. And so these again are the quality of life measures that we're talking about. So that's kind of my theory on the power of tourism, why it's important, why we don't play around with it. This was a good idea that puts a benefit on the local community on the shoulders of people who are coming into our community. So I like the idea. Currently, and this is just more for the record, currently the city of Ely at 13.5% is the 4th highest room tax in Nevada. So above us is the city of Wells, Wendover, and Elko, going all the way up to 16%. And then we're currently tied with Clark County and downtown Reno Sparks at 13.5. The difference is with them is they tack on a resort fee on top of that, which is about $20, and then they charge room tax on top of that. So when you go to Reno or you go to Vegas, your $100 room turns into like $150 room real quick. That's not the experience we want to provide. And I'm glad that the proposal is not to increase room tax even more. Okay, because I think that would be shooting ourselves in the foot. So in 2017-18, White Pine County Tour and Rec collected a total of $1.5 million in room tax. Okay, that was 2 years ago. Last year, White Pine County Tour and Rec collected $1.7 million in room tax. All right, there was a little bit of, there wasn't an increase in the room tax. I believe there was just an increase in what the contribution to the city was over this last year. Because you got to remember, before I got here, there was an ordinance that was passed to increase room tax and increase the percentage of room tax that went directly to the city. So really the dust has just settled from the last ordinance. We're still trying to figure out what exactly that means. But what it comes out to is the city of Ely, for city room tax, it was 15% over what we projected. And the board before I came in here projected a 5% increase from the year before. Okay, so you can see, that's a pretty substantial increase from one year to the next in room tax collected. For the county, it was over 20% of what was projected. All right, our hotels did raise rates. The new county room tax increase doesn't take hold till this year, so that doesn't account for anything. This was more people coming into the community, resulting in this. And when I did a survey of the hotels and stuff like that when I came in, they were saying, yeah, in the summertime we're about 80% occupancy, but in the winter it really drops down to about 50%. Doing a survey a year later, talking to our major hotel properties, they were throwing out things like, I've been at 80% the entire year, I've been maxed out this entire summer, I had people in my hotel through February, things like that. So I think it's not just that we increase room tax, it's that we increase the amount of visitors that are coming into the community. And then center revenue, so center revenue was up 42% over projected, and we didn't raise any of our prices at the convention center. This is literally 42% more events and conferences coming to the convention center to increase that revenue. So what does that come out to for direct contribution? In fiscal year 17-18, the 2% that was dedicated to the Nevada Northern Railway equated to $234,000. In this last year, fiscal year 18-19, it was $257,000. In my opinion, if you take into account the amount of tickets that were sold, if you take into account the marketing juggernaut that the train is turning into with the Star Train and everything like that, we've seen a return on investment on that. That's money well spent right there. The state of Nevada, they get a 3/8% as ordered in the ordinance from the state back in the day when they created this. That equates to about $44,000 in 17-18, $48,000 in 18-19. Talking with Travel Nevada, they're extremely happy with the direction that we're going. They have sent out more writers, more bloggers, more videographers to Ely in this last year than they have in a long time. So they're extremely happy and they're reinvesting into our community. The city of Ely in 17-18 got $158,000, and because of the percentage that goes into the city from that past ordinance in fiscal year 18-19, that moved up to $288,000 that the city of Ely got directly from White Pine County Tour and Rec. And then the county pool, $11,000 in 17-18, $13,000 in 18-19. So if you take all of that out in the room tax that we collected this last year and what the dividends were that we paid out, that leaves about $1.1 million in Tour and Rec's budget to invest back into the community through marketing and community investment stuff. That includes running the convention center, marketing, and putting on events in the community that need to be incubated, as well as the grants program. So that's ultimately what it goes into, and I'll touch into that a little bit more about how that money's reinvested. But what we need to talk about first is the larger economic impact to Ely and to White Pine County. So going back to that Travel Nevada study that they did back in 2017, they broke down each territory. So we're in the Pony Express territory, that's essentially the Highway 50 corridor. And they break down where your visitors are coming from, how much money they spend on average, percentage of visitorship compared to the rest of the state. And the Pony Express territory got the lowest visitorship, okay? And just because it's the loneliest road, we're isolated from population, we're one of the least visited areas in the entire state. So I look at that as an opportunity of nowhere to move but up, man. We've got so much opportunity to grow and spread the brand of Ely and White Pine County to bring more people in. What they said is on average, $113 per person per day is what's contributed into our community. Okay, and this is a third-party study right here that said, in Reno and Carson City, it's about $125 a day. In Vegas, it's about $170 a day. This is the amount of new money that one person staying the night in your community leaves in your community. So follow me on this one, and this, we're doing some calculations here, but this is the amount of new money that ultimately comes into White Pine County, and with Ely being the economic center, most of the hotels, the restaurants, the shopping, you guys really do get the lion's share of this economic impact. So last year we had 700 rooms. You times that by 365 days a year, that gives us 255,500 room nights available. Going off of the 65% occupancy rate that was surveyed when I first got here, so being a very conservative moderation, we could say that 166,075 rooms were occupied. Those rooms, Travel Nevada says we can multiply that by 2.8, but I know with our contractors here that a lot of those rooms are filled by one person. And so I went ahead and I multiplied that by 2, again, taking the more conservative route, which means at 65% occupancy rate, White Pine County sees 332,150 visitors spending the night. That doesn't include daytime visitors driving through, getting gas, getting food, things like that. It doesn't include the national park or the state parks where we don't collect data on who's staying out there. So I really do feel like this is a conservative view. The numbers really are much higher. So if you take that amount of visitors times $113 per day, we're looking at a $37.5 million economic impact to White Pine County. And again, the lion's share does come to the city of Ely, being the economic center. We saw over a 15% increase last year. If we were to bump that up just even say 10%, we're talking about $41 million economic impact.